Hello and welcome to the end of the first week of our, or the last week, the penultimate week of our summer sessions. This is brought to you by the Centre for the Ecology and Conservation at the University of Exeter. We're here at the beautiful Penryn campus in Cornwall, and we teach the biosciences undergraduate and master's degree programmes. Now, all week we've been sharing stories about the teaching and research from our staff and students on the themes of cats and dogs. We love how much active research we do here, and that is done by our students. And so we've shared some of this, for example, student-run projects like the Natural Selection podcast, a really exciting computer game that looks at how cats and dogs hunt their prey when their prey have different forms of camouflage, and blogs and videos from field courses where our students meet big cats all around the world. We're also heavily involved in conservation, and we've been sharing some conservation and health projects that involve cats and dogs, including blog posts about eradicating guinea worm from domesticated dogs and humans. So if you want to find more about our summer sessions from this week, or the sessions that we've had up until now, or even our last session for next week, then have a look at the web and social media links that are in the webinar chat. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Professor Tom Currie. Tom is teaching on our master's field course to Kenya, and when he started doing this, he was inspired to start working with Enoch Enoch Mobisa. And Enoch has now become a PhD student in the department, and together with Tom, they're studying why lions and humans sometimes come into conflict with each other. Tom's going to talk about how he and Enoch have been working with communities who need protection from cattle for their lions, and how being able to protect their cattle from lions could help both lions and humans. So Tom's going to talk to us about 15 minutes, and then Enoch will join us as well live from Nairobi for a question and answer. And as you're listening and you have questions for Tom or for Enoch, then please post them in the chat below. Because there's a bit of delay between us speaking and the broadcast going live on Facebook, we can't answer questions during the talk, I'm afraid. But if you post them below during the talk, then we'll make a note of them and we'll put those questions to Tom and Enoch. Okay, Tom, well, I think we're ready to go, so over to you.
Okay, thank you, Regan. So the story of kind of how I got interested in lion conservation and conservation in general started when I started taking students on our master's course to Kenya. And one of the most vivid moments from that very first trip was we were staying in a camp outside of Nairobi National Park. And then in the middle of the night, we started hearing this noise. Now, hopefully you can hear this. So that kind of deep bellowing sound you heard there, hopefully you can recognize that as a lion. And if you've ever heard a lion in the wild, you'll know how impactful that can be. And we felt that noise right deep in our chests, and it's one of the scariest feelings that we've ever had. But that was my introduction to lions. And that's what we want to talk about in today's session. So lions, yes. On that field course is when I first met Enoch. So Enoch is somebody who's been working in conservation for a very, very long time and helped lead our field courses in Kenya and does a lot of work with local communities. And almost all the work that we're talking about here today has been done by Enoch. And as Regan said at the beginning of the talk, Regan is now a PhD student at the University of Exeter and is currently finishing his PhD. So lions, they were formerly very, very widely distributed throughout Africa and parts of Asia and even into Europe. But unfortunately, their numbers have been declining for a very long time. And you can see from that map, their current range is very, very much diminished now. And in the 1950s, there were about 400,000 African lions. But today, the number is somewhere closer to about 30,000. And numbers in different countries seem to be declining quite a lot, unfortunately. In Kenya, which is where we're talking about today, there's only about 2,000, 2,500 lions perhaps left in the wild. Now, one of the biggest causes of the reduction in lion numbers is our impact as human beings on the environments. So we've been kind of building cities, destroying the landscapes that lions live in, but also active hunting is a big problem. Sometimes that's done by Westerners going out for trophy hunting in Africa, but sometimes it's people in Africa as well who have been killing lions. And this talk is really about understanding why that happens sometimes. Now, in conservation, kind of an important part of conservation are national parks or national reserves that countries can set up to kind of protect wildlife. But national parks aren't really enough. These are the national parks here you can hopefully see in Kenya. And you can see they only cover a small area of the total land in Kenya. And as we'll see, animals don't always respect the boundaries of national parks. They don't understand that these straight lines that we've drawn on maps are where animals are supposed to be, because actually nature doesn't work like that. People have been living with wildlife for a very, very long time, and these interactions are still occurring. So I want to tell a story focusing on one of these national parks, and this is Nairobi National Park, which is, I think, the only national park that's located within the bounds of a major city. You can see that picture there, giraffes and zebra in the foreground, and in the background, the ever-growing city of Nairobi. And hopefully what you can see from that map is we've got, you can see clearly the area where Nairobi National Park is, but you can see all around the park, we've got lots of built up areas. And if we zoom in a little bit on that, we can see there's a lot of development on the north side of the park, but increasingly that development is going around the sides of the park, and even on the south side of the park, there's lots of development now. An important thing to notice or to note about the Nairobi National Park is the northern side is fenced, which obviously makes sense because they want to keep animals coming directly into the main part of Nairobi city. But the southern part of the park is not fenced. And that's for a very, very important reason, in that animals that live in the kind of savannas of Africa actually need a lot more space than is covered by Nairobi National Park. And so having the southern area, southern side of the park not fenced allows animals to move in and out of the park. And the climate is very seasonal in this part of East Africa as well, and animals will tend to move to different places following patterns of rainfall, which affects the grass that herbivores live on, and obviously the herbivores affect where big predators such as lions are going to be found. So there's lots of development going on around Nairobi National Park, and increasingly on the south side of the park we see fences being erected as people are beginning to fence off land, whereas in the past, this land was generally held in common. More recently, people have started to own areas of land privately, and they're thinking about kind of building houses and small plots of land for farms and things like that. And all these kind of things are putting pressure on the wildlife. And sometimes this is leading to conflicts between humans and the wildlife. And one big area of conflict that we're focusing in on this talk is conflict between lions and pastoralists. And pastoralists are people that keep livestock and have generally in the past lived quite a nomadic lifestyle, but have been well used to living close to wildlife. But now with the situation of kind of people not moving around so much, becoming more sedentary, they're not able to move around as much and escape some of these challenging situations. And one thing that happens is that lions come out of Nairobi National Park and will sometimes attack livestock. So you can see in that bottom right-hand picture the results of a particularly devastating lion attack. And as climate change is getting worse, there are kind of increasing pressures on movements of animals in and out of the park, and some of these problems seem to be getting worse. What I'm going to do now is show you a video which summarizes some of these situations and shows you a bit of the environment of Nairobi National Park.
Kitengela is a village on the border of the Nairobi National Park. This peaceful rural part of Kenya is home to a remarkable young man who came up with an invention that would not only save cattle, but have a major impact on lion conservation.
The lion and the human conflict has always been there. Even when I was born, Maasai were always killing lions.
Richard Turere grew up herding his father's cattle here in Kitengela, where lions regularly came from the neighboring reserve to attack his family's livestock.
So there's a border here, which is the river. The river is the border. So the lions just cross over.
Now 15, Richard still spends time herding cattle, but his big idea originated right here among the cattle.
We had a very big problem with the lions attacking our father's cows at night.
Almost daily attacks on the community's livestock left Richard's family desperate. In the region, cows are the #1 income generator for most families. Was there ever an attack while you were watching the cattle?
Yeah, one day it attacked cows when I was there, and actually killed. Yeah, they never stopped coming.
Richard was determined to come up with a solution to protect his father's cattle. He tried everything from lighting bonfires to scarecrows to electric fencing. Nothing worked.
We tried so many things. One of them was this use of branches, because we wanted to make a fence that when the lion comes at night, he would not be able to see the cows inside there. But it didn't work, and they would just step on them and then go inside and kill the animals.
One night, he made an interesting discovery.
So we'll hear more about Richard's discovery a bit later in the talk. But hopefully you saw from that video the idea, the conflict that's going on with lions coming and eating the cattle the pastoralists. And the particular people that are found in this area around Nairobi National Park are known as the Maasai, and they're probably the most famous ethnic group in Kenya. Kenya is a very, very diverse place culturally, about 50 different ethnic groups, but the Maasai are probably the most famous. If you know the Kenyan flag, you know there's a Maasai shield and spears on the flag. And the Maasai have a reputation as being lion killers. So as a traditional part of Maasai culture, it was young men, in order to become warriors, had to kill lions. And you can see from that that kind of image persists. There's a kind of very staged photo at the bottom there. That's not a real, I think that's a stuffed lion with somebody pretending to spear it. But you can see in that picture on one of those people wearing the kind of the furry thing on top of their head. That's actually that's from a lion. So that's a symbol, that an old symbol that would be used to denote that somebody has killed a lion. But this kind of idea persists into the present, even though it might not actually reflect reality. We know that lions are killing livestock, but some people are saying that livestock is being killed by other animals, and that the Maasai are just retaliating against lions because they think the lions are killing, but actually could be other animals. And yeah, this idea still persists that the Maasai are kill lions for cultural reasons, even though that has been changing for quite a long time now. So what Enoch did, wanted to kind of get to the bottom of this and understand why sometimes Maasai people do kill lions. And to do this, he conducted a whole series of focus groups. And focus groups is a technique that we use sometimes in order to get very thick or kind of very rich data from people about why certain things are happening. It involves speaking to a group of people together and asking some structured questions. And in this case, Enoch was asking very structured questions about what are the causes of livestock deaths? What animals do people think are the causes of these deaths? And other issues around how people live their life close to these national parks. I should say this picture that I'm showing you here is taken from one of our field courses, where we actually get our students to conduct focus group discussions to gain some practice in these kind of techniques. But Enoch did a huge number of these. So he did more than 200 focus group discussions over a period of several years and in several parts of southwest Kenya. So you can see from the map, he conducted focus groups in the area around Nairobi National Park. And you can see from that map that the kind of conservation areas, the area that the Nairobi National Park actually depends on for kind of movement of wildlife, and the whole ecosystem is actually much larger than the national park itself. He also conducted focus group discussions in the Masai Mara conservation area, which is a very famous place in Kenya that is the kind of the northern extent of the famous Serengeti plain that extends into Tanzania, and also the Amboseli conservation area as well. And found different rates of people admitting that lions are killed by communities in these areas, and different rates of the extent to which lions were identified as predators of livestock. So the main results from this work that Enoch did, we can ask the question, so what are the things that cause livestock death? So the things that were mentioned were disease, theft, drought, sometimes animals getting lost, and also depredation. So that's predation by carnivores, wild carnivores. And so we asked, or we ran some statistical analyses on the data that Enoch had collected, asking which of these things predicts whether communities have killed lions. And what we found was that disease, theft, drought, and loss aren't good indicators of whether communities have killed lions, but whether communities report that they've lost cattle or livestock, goats, sheep, whatever, to wild carnivores does predict whether lions have been killed by those communities. And then focusing in on that, when we think about the different animals that might be implicated in killing livestock, animals that were talked about were hyena, dogs, jackal, leopard, cheetah, and lions. And again, what happens is that the only animal that predicts whether lions are killed is when there's been attacks and depredation by lions. So the story of kind of Enoch's work there tells us that Maasai people aren't just killing lions indiscriminately. They're not killing lions just because it's part of their culture, and they're not killing them just because they're losing cattle to wild carnivores. They're pretty good at recognizing when lions have actually killed their livestock, and so it's quite an understandable situation that these communities end up retaliating against lions when their livestock are killed by lions, which suggests that's a really important thing, because it helps us understand what are the kind of things that we need to do in order to try and reduce these retaliatory killings. So there are lots of different things that can be done. So we saw in the video Richard's fences that they were putting around their cattle weren't very secure. So we can think about, can we support people to improve the fences that they put around their cattle? And actually, for quite a small investment, we can build what are known as lion-proof bomas. Another thing, so Richard, who was in that video, became famous, and his invention was very, very smart. So when he was about 12 years old, he came up with this idea of putting lights around the enclosures at night. And these lights are solar powered, and they blink on and off at nighttime. And he came up with this idea because he noticed that when he was patrolling at night, when he was going around with a torch and moving around, the lions tended to stay away. So he came up with a really, really kind of inventive and very clever way of mimicking, trying to trick the lions into thinking that humans were around protecting the cattle. And this invention has been very, 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 very useful. So if we can do these things whereby we stop the kind of conflict between lions and people, then that will hopefully be a big way of stopping the human-wildlife conflict and stopping retaliatory killings. There's also schemes that are supposed to be in place in Kenya, and we can talk about this more in the question and answer, about trying to compensate people for loss of livestock. So one of the reasons that people talk about why they retaliate against lions is because they feel that they're not supported in these things. They lose a lot of their wealth if livestock are killed by lions, but they feel that the government is not helping them out, is not compensating them. So we can talk about some of the compensation schemes that are being put in place and some of the problems with those. And as a closing point to this talk, I want to talk about, kind of emphasize the fact that, we can go beyond just thinking about conservation in terms of national parks. So we've already seen that animals don't respect the boundaries of national parks, and nor should they. But in somewhere like Kenya, more than 70% of Kenya's wildlife actually lives outside of these national parks and permanent protected areas. So another type of conservation that's being introduced into Kenya is the idea of wildlife conservancies, which are about getting people together to develop areas that are suitable for wildlife conservation, but can also be used for other things. So they can be used for ecotourism. They're also can be used to help support people in their traditional pastoral ways of life. And if we look at this map here, you can see those kind of pink areas and some of the brown areas are where these conservancies are being set up in Kenya. And you can see that the area of conservation then is being extended to much broader areas in ways that actually help people as well as helping wildlife. And that's important for thinking about the whole ecosystems that animals live in. One such initiative, that kind of big pink blob in the north that you saw on that map, is an area known as the Northern Rangelands Trust, which is a collection of these conservancies which are run by communities and are helping to transform people's lives in these areas. And at the University of Exeter, we're working with some of these groups and some of these people to help understand what makes some of these conservancies successful and how we can improve this form of conservation, this form of sustainable living. And that picture there is Lindsay Walker, who's a postdoc working with myself and Enoch on some of these issues. So that's where I'm going to stop talking. Please do send questions to talk about, and we're happy to answer your questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom. So yeah, as Tom said, please do. We have one question in the chat already, so please do ask more, and I've got a few questions. Before I start asking them, I'm going to introduce Enoch. Enoch, could you unmute yourself, please?
Hello.
Fantastic. So Enoch was mentioned in Tom Currie's talk, and I know Enoch. I think I met him when I was in Kenya several years ago. Enoch Mabisa you work for Simply Green Worldwide in Nairobi, and you're also doing a PhD with Tom and Dave Hodgson in the Centre for Ecology and Conservation. Could you tell us what inspired you to get involved with conservation in the first place? Oh, and I should add that Enoch is coming to us live from Nairobi at the moment.
Yeah, hello everyone, and once again, I am a conservation enthusiast from Kenya. I don't know if I can have a direct answer to that question as to how I was inspired to be in conservation, but I think I was born in a place where naturally you become a conservationist. You either love wildlife or hate it. And I happen to be on the side where I realized there's a very close relationship between our livelihoods and the nature that we live in or live with. And so as I was growing up, I saw the challenges facing the people that are living around these protected areas. And when I started understanding global issues, I realized that for anything that we do to be sustainable, we need to put back to nature what it gives us. And so in a small way, I started doing things that would lead to conserving the natural resources that we use for our livelihoods.
Okay, fantastic. Can you tell us in that case how you about the job that you're doing in Kenya at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm working with communities living around protected areas, particularly Masai Mara National Reserve, around Nairobi National Park, which Tom's talk has largely covered, and Amboseli. But I also have interest in other conservation areas like Kakamega Forest, the Mau Forest, and the rest of Kenya. So we are working with these communities because they face the challenge of losing their livelihood, which is largely livestock, extensive livestock production, to wild cats, and mainly lions, hyenas, and cheetah and leopard. And so I understand that these big cats are very important in the natural food web, and they play an important role of regulating the other biodiversity, the natural, the wild ungulates need to be regulated. And so other than that, they also excite every human being's thinking. And so people will travel from everywhere to come and watch these animals, try to understand how they live. They have an interesting life. They live in families. They have their own language. They have their own society, regulations, and a structure that when you get to understand it, it's very interesting. And so I try to see, to work with these communities and see that there is harmony between these people. And also it is interesting to understand that these people have lived with this wildlife for ages, and they had a way of living with these resources. And then there's something that has changed that is now causing conflict between the people and this wildlife. And this is what I'm trying to understand, to be able to come up with strategies of minimizing this conflict, so that we can have wildlife now, wildlife in future, and for other future generations. And so my work mainly involves research to understand issues, and also talking to the people, trying to implement some of the solutions that we find from discussions.
Okay. And so it's interesting that you mentioned the animals other than lions that might take livestock. So the question that we had from Eve on Facebook was, are those other animals ever killed if they're known to have taken livestock?
Yes, some of them get killed. But interestingly, what elicits a lot of animosity from the people when it kills livestock is the lion, leopard, not so much of the cheetahs. And I think there is a cultural relationship between the people and the hyenas that we don't talk about. That leads to people not being so much worried about the hyenas when they take their livestock. Well, they get angry, but not as much as when they know that a lion has taken their livestock. And I think to a large extent, this is because lion attracts a lot of income, a lot of interest from other people. And the government and conservation authorities are more interested in protecting this animal and portraying it as a source of income, and therefore it is their animal. And so the community feels that somebody's important animal has taken my important animal, and so we need to have a way of solving this. So sometimes it is a response to that loss in livelihood, but also is making a statement. We need to talk.
That's so fascinating. So in that case, it's not just conflict between humans and lions, but it's conflict between humans and different parts of society then.
So
Yes.
just to add what Enoch said there, the wildlife in Kenya is legally belongs to the people of Kenya. But in recent years, we've heard people talk about the wildlife belonging to the Kenya Wildlife Service. So people are feeling that this wildlife doesn't belong to them; it belongs to the government or this governmental organisation, and I think that's causing a lot of conflict as well.
Yeah.
So sorry, did you want to come in, Enoch?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that wildlife do not make a conscious decision to go out and kill livestock. They are in their normal life, in their normal business of foraging, and then they find livestock, which naturally is easier to catch than the wild prey, and so they kill. So we are not very right in saying that there's conflict between humans and wildlife. Actually, it is conflict between the people that take care of the livestock and the people that are perceived to be taking care of the wildlife.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'm going to come at you both with a question from Dave Hudson, which is very relevant. Do you feel that the tolerance of wildlife taking livestock is improving, or are the pastoralists, I think that's what he means, becoming more frustrated with a perceived lack of support from government? And so are pastoralists perhaps retaliating more quickly if a lion takes their livestock?
I think this is going to be context specific, depending on the history and the interventions that have been put in place in different parts of the country. There is a general feeling that people are more frustrated by the authorities and by living with wildlife. But in other places, you can see that there's a positive there's an improvement in the relationship between people and the authorities that are taking care of wildlife, and also an improvement or a change in the perception of people's view of wildlife. As, for example, in the Masai Mara, there have been consistent interventions, people creating awareness, educating the people and the community members, and also responding by giving some consolation to the people that have lost livestock to wildlife. And here you can see people are taking longer to react, for example, to retaliate to against wildlife that has taken their livestock, because they know that in between somebody will come in to try and console them or compensate them for what they've lost. And also they can see the benefit of this wildlife, because they believe, they know that the consolation is coming from income that is generated from tourism through this wildlife. But in other places where I think, although there are some interventions, but not widespread, and they have not been there for long, like in Amboseli, parts of Amboseli, people are getting more and more hostile to wildlife that has taken their livestock. And so, yeah, as I said, it's context specific, but in some places it is improving, and in other places people are more frustrated, and there are more instances of retaliation than it had been before.
Okay, so great to have some kind of good news story that where there is good trust between local authorities and pastoralists, and there is swift compensation, then this friction can be reduced.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so I think Enoch identifies the key thing is that it's the extent to which people are seen to benefit from wildlife, and an important thing is, so Nairobi National Park, for example, the money, lots of people, it's the biggest national park in terms of numbers of people going and revenue generation, but the people living around the national park don't necessarily feel like they benefit directly from that huge amount of tourism that goes on, because the money gets funneled to the central government. I guess so. In the conservancy system that I talked about at the end there, one of the ideas behind that is that setting up conservancies is one way that people can more directly benefit from wildlife as well.
Okay. So that's great. That was one of the questions that I had actually, which was whether ecotourism can help here. We have a question from Morwenna Hope. How are the lions being killed? Are they being actively pursued, like the people that we saw with spears in your pictures, Tom? Or are they being lured towards poisoned carcasses or some other methods?
I think there are several ways that the people use to kill lions, and they are getting more and more secretive about how they do this, because they know that they would, if they were found, they are found out, they would be prosecuted by the authorities. So previously, people used to pursue lions more openly and kill them using spears. There was a time that there was a spike of lions being killed by poisoning, but that was for a short time. And then in a few cases, we have seen people luring the lions with a dead carcass, and then they would kill them using spears. And also there have been instances where if a lion has killed a cow or sheep or goat, they would lace it with poison. And because lions have got this habit of protecting their food once they have hunted it down, so they would eat. When they get filled up, they would stay around there and come back to that food again. So it's very easy to kill them by poisoning, although this one sometimes kills other predators that are not targeted.
And that's reminding me that of something that I learned in Kenya, which was about the problems that can be caused by vultures by poisoned livestock. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, it kills all other, because naturally, once the big cats have killed the prey, they would be followed by other small predators like jackals, and then afterwards they would be followed by the vultures to do the cleanup. And so if there was a poison, that would kill all these predators.
Yeah.
And the point about the vultures is really important as well, because they are very, very important in the broader ecosystem as well. So actually these things can have big knock-on effects to other species in the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we've got two related questions here. So one is from Beth Trapp, and she asks, are there any biological deterrents for lions? And I think what she means, we know that beehives can stop elephants coming onto people's lands. Is there anything like that that can be done to try to keep lions away from pastoralist ranging areas?
Humans are the best, one of the best biological agents.
Yeah, the only thing that I know that is living that lions are conscious about that and the fear is a humans who are dressed in attire that is closer to the Maasai's, and who have a smell like that of Morans.
Like that of Morans?
Morans, yeah, the Maasai warriors who have just graduated from one level to another. And so they live in the wild. They stay for nowadays a month or so. They don't take a shower, and the shower that they take is using cream that they get from milk and animal fat. And so that would have a distinct smell that the lions can recognize.
Ah, that's so fascinating. So in that case, a related question from Alex Dibner. Hello, Alex. Alex was an undergraduate with us and came on a field course with me a few years ago, so it's nice to hear from you. Alex says, has anything been done like painting eyes on the back of cattle to deter predators? That apparently this has been attempted in Botswana.
Yeah, I've only read about that, but we have not tried that one in Kenya.
I think some of these attacks happen at nighttime, or a lot of attacks happen at nighttime, and I think they possibly might not work as well at nighttime. But
yeah, and I don't know, because usually the lions would kill by giving a kiss of death. to most animals. And so I don't think that, I think they get excited when they see eyes of an animal looking at them and when they're dying.
Okay. Alex Dibner also asks about things like playback speakers that could send deterrent calls. I'm not sure what might deter a lion apart from perhaps human conversation or human shouts.
Yeah, that has not been tried anywhere here in Kenya. Yeah, and I don't know if there's an animal that can scare lions. I mean, sometimes, you know, they follow their prey to human settlements. And I remember one time when we were camping, where we used to camp in Masai Mara, and this is like a long-term camp. So the antelopes would come and seek refuge around the tents, but then lions very fast adapted to this, and they would come and surround the antelopes in our camps, and the males will scare the antelopes by roaring, like the roar that Tom played, and the antelopes would be scared and run away from the human tents, and then they would be caught. So I think they would adapt very fast to some of these things that are not, they don't scare them beyond like beyond just scaring them. They would only be afraid if they knew that this is going to kill them.
Okay, so in that case, one quick question from me is, given that the way that Richard, this fantastic teenager, figured out that he could protect his father's cattle, one of the ways there was to have solar-powered lights, which made the lions think that there were humans at the boma. Are the lions likely to learn over time that there aren't actually humans at those bomas?
I think with them they would learn this.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is why it is important that even when we put the lion lights, we put it together with other deterrents, like the lion-proof fences, which are very effective if they are put up properly around the livestock enclosures.
So yeah, it's been one of the kind of things we've always speculated upon, you know, going back over several years. With we haven't heard, well, I haven't heard reports that the lions have adapted yet. But yeah, it's interesting to. I think we don't necessarily we think that it's to do with kind of people thinking this relates to, you know, thinking there are humans around, but there's other potential explanations as well. That could be to do with the changing in lights makes things more difficult to see. So it could be off-putting for other reasons that might actually not be sensitive to habituation.
Okay, so fantastic. So I've just had a message from Logan who says Jumbo Enoch.
Jumbo Logan.
And Logan did ask how we can best help Maasai pastoralists to defend their livestock against predators without harming their livestock, the lifestyle of the Maasai. And I feel that what you've just said has really answered that question, unless there's anything else you want to add there.
Yeah, I think awareness creation, education, sharing our experiences, talking to these people all through, and coming up with innovations in a participatory way is I think the way to go.
Okay, fantastic. Participatory science.
Yeah, I mean, and to add to that as well, so there is a scheme. So Enoch has mentioned consolation payments, and there is supposed to be a government scheme that is supposed to basically pay people if their livestock is taken by lions, but the scheme hasn't been working very well. But that's one way that could help benefit, because that would mean that that people aren't too disturbed, or the consequences of having your livestock killed by lions is not as great.
Yeah. We need to have institutions that are functional. We need to have ecotourism and all other enterprises around wildlife becoming profit-making and sustainable, and so that we can be able to channel part of that money into the compensation programs. We need to continue having our international borders open for people to keep coming. We need to have tourists coming in, support these enterprises, and so so that we can make this sustainable. Otherwise, compensation programs, I think, is a way of setting ourselves up for failure in the short run.
Okay, that's fascinating. Thank you. I'm going to take a time out from questions from the Facebook audience to just say, to ask you, Tom, a little bit about MSc courses. So you mentioned that you started to get to learn about these problems through teaching on one of our MSc programs. Could you tell us just about the MSc courses that do take this field course to Kenya and about the kind of different options that there are?
Yes, so traditionally we've had three main master's courses that go to Kenya. We've had one that's called Biodiversity and Conservation, and one that's called Biodiversity, Conservation, Science and Policy, and one that's Behavioral Ecology as well. So they have different themes. So behavioral ecology is all about understanding behavior of animals and making behavioral observations and testing ideas about animal behavior scientifically. The biodiversity and conservation course is all about understanding the different ways that conservation can take place in a country like Kenya. And then the conservation science and policy, we look at these things from the human angle and the policy side as well, even more. And so we go out for about 2 weeks, normally in January, but we may be a bit delayed this year due to the COVID-19 situation. We go out for 2 weeks, and so the conservation science and policy course that I run is taught with Enoch, who helps organize it through his company, Simply Green Worldwide. And one of the key things that we try to do is to engage and meet people on the ground, so the people actually doing conservation in these countries. And it's really, really important to understand the kind of context of trying to do conservation in a country like Kenya. It's a very different context to doing conservation in the UK. Some of the challenges, some of the situations are similar, but some are very different. So we like to hear from people on the ground, and that's why we get students to try and do focus groups and to speak to local people.
Okay, fantastic. And of course, I've just mentioned that all of our MSc courses go to Kenya, but presumably our marine course does not go to Kenya.
It could.
Kenya has a beautiful seaside area.
Yeah.
Actually, there are some marine conservancies being established in the coastal areas as well. So so marine conservation is a big thing in Kenya and other parts of East Africa as well.
Okay, fantastic. And if anyone wants to send me a message and tell us where our MSc Marine course does go to, then I can tell everybody in a few minutes. So we've got 6 minutes left, and we've got a couple of outstanding questions. So they're really a question that I hadn't thought about from Mawena Hope. Have any links been found between disease being transmitted between the lions and the livestock, or vice versa, like we have the interaction between badgers and livestock transmitting cattle to each other in this country?
Yeah, that I don't think that has been done a lot, but there is there has been found a zoonotic disease in lions. The canine distemper has been known to be transmitted from the domestic dogs to lions, and that causes a devastating effect on lions. I think largely it's because lions have got a lot of things that need to be studied about them, and they are feared, and collecting a sample from a lion is not that easy unless it is a dead lion. So yeah, we haven't had much done on that side of zoonotic diseases and lions.
There's lots we don't know about lions. So even something simple as population numbers has proven very, very difficult to get reliable data on because of, you know, they're quite secretive animals, and it's dangerous and to observe sometimes. But yeah, much more work needs to be done.
Okay. A question from Jane Tucker then. What is being done to deter trophy hunters? Is that something which happens in this region? Is that something that's encouraged? Is there a role for that in conservation?
It's not allowed in Kenya. Recently there have been discussions of trying to reintroduce that, but I think scientists and conservationists in Kenya have strongly advised against that, and it has not happened. We know that it happens in other countries. I think Tanzania is not very strong on this. I think it happens in Tanzania. And so that poses a threat to our livestock, our wildlife, because as we said, wildlife does not respect political boundaries. Lions moving out to Serengeti might be affected, or wildlife moving out to Serengeti might be affected. But yeah, we don't have that one as a problem in Kenya. If it is happening, it is termed as illegal take or poaching, which is supposed to be prosecuted.
Okay, and is there a lot of poaching in Kenya?
Poaching is an illegal activity. And so it's very hard to get data about how much poaching is taking place. But there is a general perception that poaching has decreased over the years, particularly poaching for tusks, lion mane, teeth, and claws. But having been around the Masai Mara for some time, we feel that poaching for bushmeat is something that is on the increase, particularly so now that people's livelihood has also threatened. Income that was coming from tourism is not flowing as it was, and that's been negatively affected by the COVID-19 situation. So people are moving from poaching for subsistence or for just household consumption to poaching for bushmeat for trade. So that might be something that is increasing now.
Okay, thank you. And I think, Tom, perhaps I'm hoping that you wouldn't mind just talking a little about the kind of broader controversy about things like trophy hunting and whether there's a role for them in conservation or not, perhaps beyond Kenya and beyond lions.
Well, I mean, I guess the biggest debate or the argument for it is that potentially if you allow trophy hunting, that can be an income generator. And that money could then get funneled back into conservation activity. So it's one of those issues that although we might not like it, there's an argument that it could be beneficial in long run. But you'd obviously have to have population numbers that were large enough to sustain that. So I think, Enoch can correct me if I'm wrong, so some of the discussions in Kenya about reintroducing it have been for things like water buffalo, where you've got kind of quite large numbers, and in some places it's felt there's too many animals. So if you're not allowed to kill wildlife, that means you can't have culls and things like that, which are kind of topics of controversy in the UK sometimes as well. But yeah, but I'm not sure. It's not an area that I know too much about, and I don't know how well it's been studied as to whether the money from any trophy hunting or something like that actually would go back in sufficient amounts to be of net benefit to conservation activities.
And I think there's often real difficulties in regulating it and actually making sure that all of the activities are legal, and as you say, knowing what the real impact on the populations of the game being hunted are. Yes. Okay, well, I think we've managed to answer everybody's questions. and we are on time. So we've been going for an hour. So I think I'm going to let you go. To everybody that's out there, do have a look at the social media links that we've posted below this video to find out all of the research and teaching that we've been posting around the themes of cats and dogs, domestic, feral, and wild. And it just remains for me to say thank you very much to Tom for giving us that talk, and for Enoch for joining us from Nairobi. And Enoch, very best of luck finishing the final stages of your PhD.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.